this time of year is as early as you can really begin your rose pruning. We're in the second half of November. I'm going to start with some climbers. This is one of the oldest fashioned climbers, Constant Spry. I think I'm right in saying it was David Austin's first cross rose. It doesn't repeat flower, so you can leave some of the old flower heads on to turn into hips. It does have good hips at the end of the season. It throws a lot of extension growth up between the end of June and the end of the summer, which I'm permanently cutting back to keep it in check to allow the plants in the border to grow on. You start off with a few essential tools. Constant Spry is very prickly, so don't go in there without a pair of gloves. You need a pair of secateurs, and if you're pruning a lot of different roses, and if some roses, which inevitably they will have black spot or rust on by this time of year, and if some of them have got dead stems, it's advisable to have some sort of disinfectant to dip your secateurs in between, moving between two different roses. So you've got secateurs. I've also got a pruning saw and a pair of loppers, a wheelbarrow and a ball of string. This particular specimen doesn't need any new stems tied in this year, so I'm just going to go and cut back to the old wood. You're looking for dead, diseased or dying branches, or rubbing or crossing branches, and you want to remove them too. An amateur without instruction will leave far too much of the rose left on the plant after a winter prune. So I'm just looking for dormant lenticels down the stem. There's a little one there, and I'm cutting that back. That will grow from there. This is crossing that, so I'm going to take that one right down to there. There's a little notch on that trunk, so that'll grow from there. That comes to there. So how do you know? Really watch this, and then it's practice and experience. It's hard to believe how well roses regrow from being cut right back down. That's half of the rose pruned back. I'm now just going to get a little bit of string and just tie this bit in, if I want it tied in. You know what? I'm going to take a decision that I'm going to cut this whole stem out, because ideally I want most of Constant Spry on this end of this panel and on the panels facing south, because this end gets full of clematis. Right, moving down to this bit. Now there's another one which has flowered well this year and the last year. I might yet cut that out, but I'm going to deal with this side first and then have a look and make a decision. You see a lot of dead stems that I'm cutting out. These are stems that I probably cut back to last year that just didn't grow. But lots did grow, and the whole wall was covered in flowers. And don't worry about them. If they haven't grown, you get an opportunity to trim them out the following winter. And the extension growth I cut off in the summer is extraordinary how quickly it can grow. It can grow sort of 9 foot in a matter of weeks.
Wow.
Then it'll be sort of dangling off the fence, and you just have to trim them back. The right side of the wire is on the other side to the wall or the fence, so on the open side, because if it's on the wall side or the fence side, as it grows the stem will swell and it'll eventually get trapped, and the wire will grow into the stem That opens up a wound which is more susceptible to get rusts, coral spots into the wound, which won't help the long-term health of your rose tree. The joy of rose pruning is there's no absolute right and wrong. Roses are quite forgiving, and the important thing is cleanliness after you've pruned, giving things a good mulch so that they've got food to take up through the winter and into next growing season. Right, tiny bit of tying in. It's just to keep, see that dangly bit wants to be on the floor. I don't want it on the floor, so I'm going to tie it up here. Right. Now, what's left to do, which is really important, is to tidy up. Because all of the rose leaves at the end of the year will have black spot on the leaves. Some will have rust on the leaves. I can't see any rust on this one at the moment. And some of the dead stems might have coral spot, which is another fungal disease, which if you leave your rose leaves or anything with that fungus in the soil, that fungus will overwinter in the soil and will be there to reinfect the fresh new growth next spring. So clean it all up, make sure all the leaves are gone before you start your mulching. That is the bulk of it cleaned up. At the end, I've not got time to do it now, I will go into the border, cut the clematis and the geranium back, get rid of all the rose leaves, and then I'll run a lawnmower over here just to pick up any of the last of the gubbins before I do a feed and a mulch. So that's Constant Spry, finished. Bimble, look this way. This good girl. This is a fairly vigorous growing climbing rose called Madame Alfred Carrier. It's a fairly old rose. It's got the Award of Garden Merit from the RHS. This one was planted in 2006/7, shortly after the house was built. It does a main flush of flowers at the end of June, early July. Gets covered in white scented flowers, and then it sporadically flowers throughout the summer. It throws up loads of wispy growth that I'm loath to cut off during the summer, and you can see I've let it grow over the office window because it just keeps flowering on the ends. But now we've come to mid-November, it's not going to produce any decent flowers, and if it does have a flower bud, the frosts are going to come and it's going to go mouldy. So now I'm going to take it back, and you'll be surprised how much you take off it. I pretty much just cut it back to that framework, and all of this growth is just 1 year's growth. Right, so we just get stuck straight in. This is the end of year prune. I'm looking for buds. Ideally I cut just above a bud, and ideally you slant your cut away from the bud to prevent frozen water sitting in the bud and rotting it, but it's not essential. That's one thing you're looking for, and you're trying to prevent rubbing branches. So if a branch is going underneath and it's actively rubbing on the wall, it's going to wound it, and that can be an entry for disease. And up here I'm way too close to the edge of the roof, so if I was to prune that like that, by April time the growth is going to be way over that and it's going to get damaged in the wind, and that's going behind the wire and it's rubbing on the wall. So that one's coming back to just above this bud here. If you're doing it for the first time, probably half a day to a day. But if you choose a nice day, it's a really nice job to do. Much better than sitting inside watching telly or take off the leaves with black spot on them. A little bit of tying up on anything that's come loose over the last year. That'll do nicely. Come down to the last bit of work from the ground. Tidy it all up, mulch it, feed it, move on to the next one. So I've cleared up all the rose trimmings, so there's no leaves with black spot or anything around it. Then I've given it a couple of handfuls of bone meal on the base, which will feed it through next year's growing season. And I'm covering it with some really good organic matter, which this is the end of a big bag of Dalefoot Lakeland Gold, but if you've got your own homemade compost on the go, that's good. Anything, any good organic matter. And that's it, pruned, fed, and ready to grow for another year.